10 years ago, they started talking about trauma informed. It seems like 5 years ago, there's like this uptick. Everyone's talking about being trauma informed. And I'm like, well, it's really trauma informed is not enough. Because I've been teaching trauma informed for 25 years. It's not enough to be informed about trauma anymore. You have to be trauma responsive. In trauma responsive, you have to know how to respond to trauma. See, you can be informed about trauma all day long until you get stressed. And then you get stressed, everything you learned just went out the window, and now you're being trauma reactive. And so we got to help people bridge the gap between just thinking about trauma and knowing about trauma and doing their little stupid hand analogy around the brain and the limbic system, and actually getting into the heart and understanding how do you respond to it when it shows up. And the first response is always the internal response. So how do you navigate the internal response? And then how do you stay present? So
Yeah, well, this is what I love about your work. And we'll just start jumping in right here because I feel like
yeah,
this
man.
will naturally lead us on. Is that even though you specialize in children, in adoptive families, adoptive children, it's like the principles that you're sharing are really personal, right? Like I had this, just like this feeling, this sense, um, as I was parenting and noticing that emotional things were coming up, stress was coming up for me, memories from childhood. I realized that, oh, yeah, there's a place for family therapy. There's a place for modalities like for the kids and for everything. But it's like it has to start with me. Like if I just take care of myself and give myself some awareness and some space, then the dominoes are gonna fall much differently, right? A lot of people might be surprised by you if they're coming to you with I've got a problem child, or my kid just keeps doing this, or like he's making a big deal about that. All of our focus is on the child, but you start from a different place.
Yeah, it's a different paradigm. And because it's a different paradigm, it is a different way to see the world. So I have a different paradigm for how I look at things. And to me, it seems like it's common sense. And I really don't understand why the field of neuroscience and the field of psychology doesn't come together and make this a much more imperative direction. But I always start with families. I only work with families. I can't imagine a world working with a small child by themselves. I always start with families. I always work with families. I always start with the parents because I have to help the first of all the family because you are a family unit. You don't take the child out of the family. The analogy I used to use is you take the pea out of the soup, you put salt and pepper all over the pea, and then you drop it back in the soup. It's not going to change the flavor. That's what we do when we do child-centered therapies. You're taking the child out of the dominant frequency that they exist in and expecting the frequency to change. So what you're actually doing is you're scapegoating the child, which is a huge psychological principle anyway about scapegoating and rescuing it. But we do it all the time. The moment we diagnose, the moment we medicate, you're scapegoating the child. And then the parents bring the child to therapy and then they go sit in the waiting room or go shop or whatever while the child is getting therapized. And then they wonder why children grow older and don't grow better. And so I don't separate the family. I start with the parents because I have to help the parents. There's a couple of things with that. I have to help the parents understand why they're reacting the way that they do. Good, bad, or indifferent. No shame, no blame, none of that stuff. It's just like you're having reactions to something that's going on. Let's explore that, which is going to take us down to an exploration of their own blueprints. How did they learn to parent the way they parent? Period. That's all. John Bowlby said the first 3 years of your life establish the blueprints for all your future social and emotional relationships. So, probably within about 10 minutes of spending time with someone, I want to know what their birth was like. What was your in utero experience like? What was your experience with your mom and dad like? Because those are the blueprints that shape all of us. They shape all of us. Adopted, foster care, biological, step, it doesn't matter. Grandparents, it shapes all of us. And I want to help adults embrace a sense of self responsibility. I want to help them embrace the fact not only self responsibility but self power. See, I believe that all these systems of care have disempowered us. I feel like they've taken us, they've taken the answers and they've externalized them and they've put them behind the door of an office of someone who has credentials, who usually is just as screwy, if not screwier, than the person that they're trying to help. Because usually the mental health professional hasn't done enough of their own work to realize when they're stressed and when they're scared. And so then you get these self perpetuating systems. So I need to help the parents have some deeper self understanding. So now I can then help transfer that awareness from themselves to their child. Now, when I start two things, when I start helping them understand their child's trauma, understand their child's history. Now, because I've helped them go in and understand themselves, they have a deeper emotional awareness. So that's important. So then, also through my process of working with parents, I'm going to be helping them engage emotionally. I'm going to help them grieve. I believe, Nolan, that unexpressed trauma, unexpressed grief is the single biggest trauma that exists in our society.
Absolutely.
I just don't think we have been allowed to grieve, and we carry that pent up energy in our systems. And so it's that energy vibrates. And so the moment you get sad, you try to wipe it away. And the moment you get angry, well, you're not supposed to be angry. And the moment you feel frustrated, you're like, why you shouldn't make me feel this way. It's just unexpressed grief. And so I need to help parents go into that understanding within their own hearts and within their own guts and within their own awareness, so that now when you ask and I used to do these and I still do it from time to time I'll do a lecture and I'll partner people up and I say, share with the person next to you a painful thing in your life and identify that how that painful thing made you feel. And the person who I call them the holders, all I want you to do is breathe, and I want you to hold space, and I want you to pay attention to yourself. So when they're in whatever, sharing their story, having their feelings, I just want you to connect to how you're feeling. And so I'll do a couple rounds of that, and then I'll say, "How easy is this?" And they'll be like, "Oh my God, this is terrible. Number one, it makes me feel really uneasy. This person's a stranger, and number two, wow, I'm sharing stuff I've never shared before, much less with a stranger." And I'm like, and the reason I do this is because every time you put your child in therapy, that is exactly what you're asking them to do. You're asking them to work on stuff that you would not want to work on yourself. So that's why I'm doing it. And number two, every time your child has feelings and you shut them down, you're not holding space for them because it makes you feel uncomfortable. So I have you holding space just as a reflection of what it's like to hold the space for your child when they have feelings. And so I just do that little exercise, and it's so interesting. It's interesting, but it's not interesting because I've been doing it for so long. How people in 20 minutes of an exercise will say, I never knew that before. I just talked about something that I hadn't talked about ever. It's a fascinating reflection of relationships in our society. So then once I help parents get to that deeper emotional awareness of themselves, they can actually emotionally be aware and understand their child. Because all this stuff we're talking about is not about information. It's all about emotion. And emotion, relationship is emotional. And this is why we end up struggling, because as you can see from my bookshelf, I've got tons of books. I've written tons of books. But a book is information and education. It's very cognitive. Relationships are emotional, and that is a terrain that we are not comfortable with.
You've already brought up the T word, trauma. And I know when I first heard trauma being used in therapies and what I was that I was involved with, I initially like pushed it away, like, oh,
Yeah.
because I didn't have any sort
Yeah.
of big experience of someone dying, or like
Mm.
what I perceived as like, what I call like a capital T trauma, like really,
Yeah.
really big, obvious.
Yeah.
Um, so would you please define trauma for us? Because I think it really
Yeah.
would bring more people into this conversation.
Yeah. In fact, sometimes I think I make it so simple. It's easy not to even realize how pervasive it is. But trauma is any stressful event you've encountered in your life that was unpredictable, unpredictable, overwhelming, and unexpressed. So when you've not had an opportunity to express, process, and make sense of that stressful, that prolonged, overwhelming, unpredictable event, can become it goes from being a short-term stressful experience to a long-term, potentially brain altering, lifelong experience. So any stressful event which is prolonged, overwhelming, and unpredictable, and when we don't have an opportunity to express, process, and understand, it can impact us for our entire lives. And if you think about that as children growing up in our society, well, let me just beyond that, because people think about trauma as being domestic violence, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all the common traumas in social services, right? That's what
Yeah.
we like to think. I like to use the example of my wife. My wife's grandfather just passed away. It was at the beginning of this year. This has been a long year. So it was the beginning of this year. I do believe it may have been the end of last year. It was the first loss that she'd ever had in her family. It's the first loss in her family that had ever occurred. And he was 90 years old. So people would take that and they would say, well, I haven't had any trauma in my life. There's been no trauma in my whole family. But just the opposite is true. She's had traumas in her life since she was a small child, compounded traumas. And we just don't realize that traumas are stressful events that are prolonged, overwhelming, and unpredictable, that you didn't get to talk about, that you didn't get to cry about, you didn't get to be angry about, and you didn't get to make sense of them. And the significance of that, the expressing, the processing, and the understanding, is that you might have to do it over and over and over and over and over again until it has finally integrated and settled into your physiology, so that when it comes up, you think about it. Because that's the other thing I love to bring up is people say, "Oh, I've dealt with that." Yeah, well, that is a tall tale sign that you have not dealt with it at all. The moment you say, "Oh, I've dealt with that," because when you've really dealt with something, you're able to tap into that experience and that emotion just like that, because it is fully coherent and it is secure in your system, in your knowledge system.
Yeah, we met some new friends recently, and we were telling them a little bit about our adoption stories with our kids. And someone asked, "Was there any, trauma or anything like that, at birth?" And I know that they were asking, "Was there drugs involved, or whatever?" I'm coming online enough as an adoptive parent to like answer this way, because I said, do you mean other than the trauma of being taken away from your biological family?
Yeah, yeah,
And it's something that like
right.
I don't think we talk about enough as
We
adoptive
don't at
parents, and in the
all. We
adoptive,
don't at
even in
all.
the best situation, which we had some incredible placement where we were with our kids, at the hospital at birth, where, on paper it all looked right. Like there is still a loss that is beginning right there. And
Yeah.
it's like we're only now, as our kids are, in 6, 7, 8, noticing how they're beginning to feel these things without
Mhm.
even be able to express them entirely, because cognitively they don't even fully process it. They just
Nothing but energy.
understand the loss, and so it's like this trauma that they're holding, that they don't
Mhm.
have the tools or development yet to fully process.
Well, they can't. They don't have the tools to put the words to it, but they are processing. And so, two things real quick. One is
Give it to
that
me. Give it to me.
trauma is multi-generational. There's research that says a traumatic experience can impact our DNA for up to 15 generations. So it's multi-generational. Two, all of our most common parenting practices, especially around behavior, punishment, spanking, all that kind of stuff, all those are rooted in trauma. So I've been really laying it down on people over the last couple of years. All these, the timeouts, the spanking, the yelling, the shaming, the grounding, the isolation, these are all trauma-based behaviors. These are all behavior modification tools and practices rooted in trauma. Rooted in trauma. We learn these as a byproduct of trauma. So we just pass them down automatically. And here's the third thing. I said two, but here's the third. Children are always working through their trauma. They don't have the words to say this is what I'm doing and why. And adults don't have the internal awareness to create a space when a child is having behavior expressions and behavior problems to say, this is not about me. This is not me being a bad parent, or this is not about me being a not good enough parent. This is my child having an energetic experience, period. I don't need to know all the details. I just need to hold the space for them to discharge the energy as they need to be able to discharge it, which ties into the unexpressed grief. Because a lot of times when children, like I have a grandbaby right now, she's 6 months old, but from the time she was an infant, when Pop Pop is holding her and she's crying, number one, Pop Pop's not freaking out. Number two, Pop Pop is saying, as he's comforting her, let it out. Let it out. Go ahead and let it out. And sometimes I'll pull her back and I'll say, tell me everything you want to tell me, because I just want her to discharge that energy. And so we don't realize that the feeling is the path to the healing, because we are so freaked out over feelings as a society. The feeling is the path to the healing, and the behavior is a manifestation of the trauma energy. So the behavior that the child is demonstrating is a manifestation of the energy that they're storing in their body. It's got to be moved. It's got to be released, or else, as Stephen Covey said, upset feelings never die. They are buried alive and they come back as something uglier. So we see that as an epidemic. We see it as an epidemic with children being diagnosed. We see it as an epidemic with children being medicated. We see it as an epidemic with parents being anxious and depressed. We see it as an epidemic with overeating and over shopping. And, holidays are going to come along. We think holidays are peaceful times, but we don't realize that the brain processes stress and excitement from the same source. So holidays are also equally stressful. That's why we overeat, and that's why we buy stuff that doesn't matter. It's like we will start buying the most ridiculous things to get the feel good of the holidays without realizing it's because we're stressed.
I've heard you just talk about and lay out for people what is actually happening in a child's brain with a stress response. Could you explain that for us here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about the limbic system. I like to talk first about the brainstem. The brainstem is the very beginning. So that's the very beginning of the storage of memories in the brain. So when your brainstem starts to develop, and it happens, this is when you're still like bean size. Your brainstem is a storage device, and it's at the bottom of your limbic system. So your brainstem actually stores every experience that you ever have. And this begins as early as conception. But for sure, by the fourth week, when hearing starts to come online and we start to develop the ears, then you start storing everything that you're hearing, and you're hearing it all through the mother. Then for sure, by the second trimester, you can start the psychological process. So now you're thinking like there's something that's existing, something's going on. So you're storing all that in the brainstem and storing all of that. And as you get older, it just goes up, and then you get to your amygdala. Your amygdala now comes online. Well, your amygdala, which is your fear receptor in your brain, doesn't come online. So you're not even experiencing fear you're experiencing stress because stress helps us develop during these early stages. But your amygdala doesn't come fully online until you're 18 months old. So it's not until you're 18 months old that this structure, this amygdala of your brain, which releases cortisol. So since it's threatened, so I try to tell people, it's like I have a grandson who's 2.5 years old. Funny thing is, my daughter asked me the other morning, the Saturday morning they came to visit, and he's hyper. I mean, he's turned up. I love it. He's loud. Everything's loud. He's wild. And she said, Dad, is he a bad child? She said, Are there bad children? I said, There are no bad children. I said, there's only bad parents and bad environments. Even bad parents come from somewhere. And I said, It's just stress. I said, He's just stressed because that part of his brain is at the peak of stress activation. And the part of his brain, the hippocampus, that's supposed to help him think through stress and to help him regulate stress and to help him activate his short-term memory, doesn't actually come online until he's 3 years old. So right now he's fully stressed and he doesn't have the ability to calm any of that down. So that's why I said, when you're always telling him, no, don't do that. Why'd you do that? I said, he doesn't even understand it. That's just energy you're creating. So you got to learn to slow down. And I love this, right? Because I get to do this for not only my child, I get to do it for my grandchild. I've got 3 grandchildren now. And so I know that this changes the legacy of our family, the lineage of our family, because this is the exact opposite of what I experienced growing up. So the brain's developing. You have the amygdala that comes online, releases cortisol. That hits the hypothalamus. We don't talk enough about the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, when the cortisol hits the hypothalamus, this little nerve bundle, is supposed to release a very important hormone, and it's called oxytocin. Oxytocin is your brain's anti-stress hormone. It's also known as the love hormone. So cortisol is the fear hormone. So when you're 18 months old and you start to have panic and anxiety and stranger danger, you're releasing cortisol. Well, the hypothalamus is supposed to counter that by releasing oxytocin. But here's what we don't realize is that oxytocin, unlike cortisol, which is automatic, oxytocin is a learned response. See, there's a difference between a reaction and a response. Your amygdala reacts. Your amygdala reacts. If someone slams the door right now, I was in an interview once and I went, boo, and the interviewer jumped, right? Because that's your amygdala. Your amygdala reacts. It doesn't think. It just fires off. Well, your hypothalamus is supposed to take that outpouring, catch it, calm it down. But that only comes from learning. We learn. That is a learned response. So when we are upset as infants and our parents soothe us, they're helping develop that oxytocin response. They're turning that response on. And then the rest of that outpouring hits the hippocampus, which is the clear thinking, which is the short-term memory, which then sends the clear signal to the frontal cortex. And the orbital frontal cortex is the executive control center for all of our social and emotional relationships. So it all comes down to, in our day-to-day relationships, it comes down to this little exchange of hormones and energy, because emotion is energy in motion. So that energy creates a vibration, which creates a frequency. And so, we have these hormones, but these hormones are only manifested by these vibrations and frequencies that we emit all the time.
And stress, and when we're in this environment, it really has an effect on time and being present. Could you speak about that?
Well, so it does. Stress does 3 things. Stress, and remember, we can have a stress experience. We're almost 99% of the time unconscious that we're even stressed. 99% of the time, we don't
It's
have
an automatic response or
it is
autonomic sort of response,
automatic.
right?
It's
Yeah.
automatic. Can occur through any of the sensory pathways. What you see, smell, hear, touch, taste, temperature, digestion, movement, intuition can all cause you to become stressed. Well, the moment you become stressed, stress causes you to react from the past, obsess about the future, but it takes you out of the present. It takes you out of the present because you're stressed. So you're reacting from the past, or you're obsessing about the future, which is changing the energy that you're actually emitting in that moment. You're not in the present moment. But the thing is, the present moment is the only thing that exists. Deepak Chopra says, I love this. I've been teaching this. He said this, I don't know, I heard him say it, read it 15 years ago. You cannot prevent the future. Now, say that to parents, and they're like, oh, what are you talking about? I can't prevent it. I got to be able to prevent the future. You
Yeah, this is what
cannot.
we do. Like we're trying to shape our kids to
That's right.
we're trying to have them go in the right direction. Yeah.
That 100%. He says you cannot prevent the future, but you can influence the future from the present. Now, breathe into that for a moment. You
Yeah.
can't prevent it. There's nothing you can do to stop the future from being what it's going to be, but you can influence it from the present. But if we're stressed and reacting from the past, and if we're stressed and obsessing about the future, and if we're stressed and we're dwelling in fear and overwhelm, guess what we're influencing to show up in the future? Stress and fear and overwhelm. So when I'm working with parents, I have to help them begin. And I love when it happens. I love, oh man, it makes me feel so good. I can have conversations with a parent, and I can hear in their tone when they're starting to get it. I can feel it because they stop reacting so strongly from the past, and they stop fearing so greatly in the future, and they start being really present. I had a mom call me the other day. She said, she called, was one of my clients. She said, she's really upset. She was talking about her daughter. She's really up. She's having a really hard time. And I could hear the 16-year-old. I mean, like an infant. She was crying. She was mad. She was crying. But mom was really calm. So I said, okay. So mom always puts me on speakerphone. So she says, do you want to tell Bryan what's going on? And she's like, oh, now you want to help me. Just leave it alone. Blah, 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 blah. So good. Because Nolan, a month ago, that 16-year-old would have been in a rage with words and cursing and threatening and la, 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 la. And mom would have been trying to overtalk her and blah, blah, blah. And so I said, Mom, it's okay. Let's just go in the other room. So she backs out of the room. I still hear her. I said, it's okay. I said, let her have her space. I said, I want you to just make yourself physically present, but I don't want you to say anything. Just let her know you're physically present. And give her space because she's actually right where she needs to be. And I said, you are doing a really good job because mom was being present. And see, we just have to I have this analogy, especially around this work that I do and this work that I teach. Parents will hear this, what I'm talking about, and it'll feel really overwhelming. Sometimes they'll be like, nah, I don't, that's coddling. That's letting them get away with it. I don't believe in that stuff. And so I say it's like looking at the Himalayas. You're looking at the top of the Himalayas. You're looking at this big old mountain. You're like, yeah, forget that. I ain't even going to try. And then other parents will hear this podcast and they'll hear how calm and dialed in you are, and they'll hear something that I say that inspires them, and they'll be like, okay, yeah, I'm Nolan and Bryan say to breathe. I'm gonna breathe, and I'm gonna be more loving and less stressed and less fearful. And they go trudging up the Himalayas all by themselves. And we know how that's gonna end. If they don't get up there somewhere and get stuck and freeze to death, they're going to come back down and they're going to be disheartened and disappointed. But there's another group of parents that hear what I'm telling them. And what I want them to know is that we're all trying to, whether you go up it by yourself or whether you go up it with a Sherpa, because I'm an emotional Sherpa. I've already been up this Himalayas 1,000 times. So either way, it's going to be a struggle. Either way, we're going to suffer. Even if you go up it with me, we're going to suffer. But guess what? I know that we're going to suffer. So when you call me and your 16-year-old is sounding like a terrified infant, I already know that that is actually a really good place. This is a place where we're going to take a rest. We're going to take a rest and we're going to hold in this space. And then when we get through this, then we're going to keep trudging up. See, parents need emotional Sherpas. They need to understand that a new paradigm requires repetition and it requires emotional impact. And that goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning. You want to carve out this space to where parents can actually go into some of these emotions. See, emotional impact is how you change the brain. But see, we don't have opportunities for people to hold us in our emotional impact. But what we don't realize is that when your child is in the midst of a behavior and you're really stressed, but you're trying to be present, that's emotional impact. That is the space for the greatest breakthrough of your relationship. Right? There's so much, and this is why I can help parents who are really, really willing to go up that mountain and really willing to have an emotional Sherpa. This is why I can help them have such impact in such short periods of time because I can support them through those really challenging, stressful times because I know that the behavior is the pathway for the healing because the behavior is the expression that needs to occur. And so because I've seen it 1,000 times, I don't get freaked out over it. So I can hold that space and then I can hold them through it. And then as I hold them through it, they can hold their child through it. And Bruce Perry says something really important. He says, the brain always returns to the way the event was handled the last time. The brain always returns to the way the event was handled the last time. So if your 6-year-old has a great big episode, and you're feeling really dialed in, really calm, really peaceful, and you sat by the 6-year-old while they're having this big old tantrum, and you don't even say anything, you're just there, and you're breathing, and you're watching, and you're just like getting into your heart space because you realize that this 6-year-old, that when we stress, we regress, that I'm really not even seeing my 6-year-old really right now. I'm seeing my stressed out little baby. And you're just holding that heart space. And you just say, babe, sweetheart, let it out. Dad's right here. I'm not going anywhere. Let it go. You don't stop talking. Okay. Let it. I got you. You see them all the way through that process until they're eventually crawling over into your lap and you're holding them and it's going to be okay. Or you ready to go have a snack now? You want to go play, whatever it becomes. You do that. Their brain stores that experience so that tomorrow or 2 hours later, when they get stressed, because that's what's going to happen, when they get stressed, their brain is going to return to the way that experience, that moment, that energy was handled that last time. And that's going to give them, that's the healing journey. That's going to give them one more positive repetition for creating a new synaptic connection. Because ultimately, this becomes about changing the brain. This is repetition. That's why repetition is required. So the repetition with the emotional impact,
Yeah.
that's moving it, right?
Yeah. Well, that
Yeah,
was a paradigm shift for me, was to realize that, as parents, it's both how most of us were raised and also just like in the culture. But the idea is that I'm a good parent if there's no conflict, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
every point of conflict has to be looked at as like, this is an opportunity. This is like the portal
Mm,
to the place that I'm trying to get to, right? Like the Himalayas. Like we
yeah.
have to go through these moments to actually like ascend.
Stress and repair.
Yeah.
It's stress and
Yeah.
repair. You work out. You get tired. You got to recover. Then you go work out again, and then you recover. It's just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a part of the process.
Yeah. Since you said repair, I'm curious to know, like, I'm a parent, my kid's having a fear response, a stress response. I'm trying my best, but then I get caught in my own fear response or
Mm,
stress response, and I react in a way that
yeah,
is not, that I know isn't
yeah,
healthy, that isn't my ideal of what I'm trying to do.
yeah.
How do we repair? How do we address those moments?
I love that question. I love the question because that's the process. So I will a lot of times say to parents after a lecture or something, I'll say, go mess up. I want you to go out and I want you to blow it. And I want you to blow it big. I want you to yell and throw stuff and do whatever it is, just blow it. And and while you're blowing it, I want you to pay attention. Because after you've blown it, now we're going to look at it and we're going to learn from it and we're going to investigate and we're going to understand. And then we're going to own our own responsibility. And then we're going to apologize to our children for blowing it and losing it because we're trying to do something different. And then the next time, we're really going to try to do something different. So that's the key. That's the process of learning. It's not we when we stress, we regress. When just because you're an adult doesn't mean that when you don't stress, you don't regress to a 3 year old or to an infant or to a 13-year-old ruly bossy adolescent. We all stress and we all regress. The key is whether we can learn from the regression, whether we can analyze it, we can seek to understand it, and not shame ourselves and not guilt ourselves and not blame ourselves or blame our children, and then take responsibility for it and apologize and then commit to doing better. That's just the process. And when that's the process, Nolan, it it need not losing our mind as parents need not be a terrible thing because we're just growing. We're just trying to do better. And think about how awesome it is. Think about how awesome it is that as a parent, you're even listening to this podcast comparative to your own parents and how much they studied being better parents. Our parents did not study being better parents. They may have read one book. They may have went to one meeting with some other parents to talk about something. But parents today are trying to really be better, and that is awesome. And so, on that process of being better, give yourself some grace and be willing to forgive yourself and then be willing to apologize. Something a lot of us never heard from our own parents was an apology. See, it takes time. It takes a lot of courage to be able to apologize. Give yourself some grace to be able to apologize to your child and then commit to doing better.
Yeah, I'm actually finding myself really grateful because I did have parents that weren't perfect, but they did model apologizing.
That's
And I
awesome.
know that it's one of the things that has equipped me to be able to apologize to my kids, where
100%.
I feel the sort of hierarchy that's built in, to other parenting dynamics.
Yeah,
Um,
then beautiful.
yeah. And I want to say, like you mentioned earlier, this is like an ongoing process, right? Like my child having a temper tantrum in the middle of Home Depot when I'm shopping, like on the floor, just flailing, going crazy. When they were like 3, 4, 5 years old, like it didn't touch me at all. But I've noticed that now that they're older, and I'm noticing these stress responses in a 8-year old or a 9-year old, and they are seemingly regressing to like a 2 or 3-year old.
Mhm.
I'm noticing how the assumptions, maybe how I was parented,
Mhm.
the stress response is stronger, and so
Mhm.
it's an opportunity for me to look at that, to be
Mhm.
curious, and to look inward essentially.
Mhm.
Because as you say, like these things are all connected back, both for the child and for the
Yeah.
parent.
Yeah, and I want to frame that as well because as our children get older, their vibration gets stronger. So falling down and having a tantrum in Home Depot at 3 has a different vibration to it than falling down and having a tantrum at 8. So at 8, that frequency is actually going in and dialing into your brain looking for a matching frequency. So when it finds that matching frequency, that's why there's the increased, oh. And as you start to be more reflective of that, not only is that is that a healing response for yourself, but it's even that much more powerful for holding the space for your child. So you can, when you can realize that that frequency and that anxiety is getting dialed up in for yourself, you can connect. Because see, then at 3, there's no telling how your parents handled you in a store at 3 versus how they handled you in a store at 8. If you behaved a certain way at 8, it was probably a much different story than behaving at 3. And so now your children are in that same process and inviting you into that same. I call them emotional invitations, right? We get invited to emotional parties. It's up to you whether you accept or whether you don't. But when you don't accept it, you can hold the space of realizing, yeah, he's 9. He's really overwhelmed right now. So here's what I want to do with this. I want to say he's really, really overwhelmed right now. He's really stressed. He might even be an infant right now. Okay, let me hold this space. And then once we make it through, which we will, because no one's going to die, we're going to make it through. Then I want to ask myself, I want to do inventory. And I love to say, I call it the A to Z principle. Z is the behavior, it's the outcome. In our society, we get stressed, there's behavior, there's this big outcome. The furthest we look because of stress is X and Y. So as parents, the furthest we look to the problem is X and Y. Well, what is it about this aisle? Or did he not eat? Did he not eat? What is he mad from, an hour ago? Did he argue with his brother? So we only look at X and Y. But in reality, in order to get to Z, you have to start with A. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to X, Y, and Z. And I call those the variables of the process. So the process dictates the outcome. So you can have any behavior, that's the outcome. But go back and explore and examine the process that led up to the outcome, and then just do better next time. Just do better next time. And just evaluate that and look at it and think about it instead of just isolating it.
I know as parents, one of the things I hear from my friends, as well as I feel in these challenging moments, is what the external eyes, like if we're in a public place or with friends, like what are those judging people
Yeah,
around me thinking
absolutely.
about me? And like this has happened more than once, but it has been when I've been alone
Mm,
with my youngest daughter, and she's black, I'm white,
mm,
and Bryan, last week or Thanksgiving week, we were flying back and we were flying through the Atlanta airport. And I'm just walking with her. My wife is with my other kids, and she doesn't want me. She wants mom because I said no to candy or whatever it
yeah,
was. And so I'm walking down in the busy Atlanta airport, chasing
with
my
all
black
these
daughter,
brands.
saying, I don't want you. Where's mom? I want mom. Stay away from me.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm just thinking, like, when is the cops gonna
yeah,
come and like handcuff me? I wasn't stressed about her. I was stressed about the environment and like what
yeah,
that would do to me.
yeah,
And it's such a
yeah,
visceral feeling when you're in these stress responses when you're feeling fear
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. What I would really encourage you to do is spend some time over the weekend, get really quiet, and go back to that situation. Go back, because I think it's fantastic that you were aware of that. See, a lot of people aren't even aware of that. They have that social anxiety. They don't even know that that's what's stressing them out, and then they act even crazier, right? So spend some time getting back into that, and then breathe into your body, and then ask yourself, when have I felt that before? When have I felt that level of feeling and anxiety before? And listen to what your body tells you. And it's probably going to track you back to probably 7 or 8 or 6 or some family thing. And then you can be like, oh wow, that's really curious. Because that's all it is. It's all it is the frequency of the moment is inviting us into a matching emotional experience emotion, energy, and motion experience that we hold in our body. That's all it is. And then that's what, as soon as we ding, as soon as we connect, that becomes the reality. So I'd be really curious to explore that. But I love that. And I just want to say, as context, if most people don't know, if you don't travel, Atlanta is almost a predominantly Black city. So there's a lot of Black folks in Atlanta. So that
Yeah,
would
yeah,
be very,
and we used to live there too, so it was like a familiar place, But I
yeah.
also realized, how out of place we like our
That's awesome.
family like looked in that environment. So, um, I want to ask a little bit more about
Let me ask
stress,
you a
but
question real quick.
yeah, go ahead.
What, what did you do in that moment when she was saying, "I don't want you, I want mom"?
Whenever I'm in that situation where my kid is getting dysregulated, if I'm holding myself, and breathing and able to, yeah, ground myself, I end up just having this laser focus on the kids. It's almost like tunnel vision. Like I
Mhm.
do not care what any other parent
Yeah,
or any other individual is
yeah,
thinking. I've even had in lesser environments when it's been in a store and someone's blowing up.
mhm,
I've had parents afterwards like come up and say, "Hey, you did a good job there." And it's strange
mhm.
because I'm almost still so in tunnel vision. It's like
Yeah,
my kid is the only
that's
is where
right.
all of my energy is going right now. Like
That's right.
as long as the environment is safe, like this is where who's getting all of my attention. So
Yeah,
that's what I toggle to is just like,
mhm.
okay, how do I just stay present for her? Like
Yeah,
whatever's happening outside is going to happen outside of me,
yeah.
and I need to focus on myself and on my child.
I think that's fantastic. I think that's fantastic.
Thanks.
Lovely.
I wanted to ask about stress, but maybe like in the positive way, and I'll use the word
Mhm.
resilience because um, I have this conversation with other parents where it's like we want our kids to be equipped, right, for the world, um, and there is a positive stress, like we've been talking about, like working out is a stress that you put on your body to make it stronger, right? So how do we think about, like, I'll use the word resiliency. How do you think about resiliency with a child that is more I'll say like stressed or more has a greater fear response? Do we need to back off more? Do we need to like hold like some of those challenging areas? Like how, or is this just the wrong paradigm to be thinking of? Should we not even be thinking about resiliency in moments where we've got like a strong fear response from a child?
No, I think it's an excellent question. It's an excellent question, and it makes me think because a lot of times people they really talk about resilience in terms of trauma. Like you can recover, you can rebound from trauma. And Bruce Perry says that we're not resilient, we're malleable. So we are shaped. And I like that so much more because it holds true to the fact that we have lived through an experience that is a part of us and that has shaped us, and we can continue to grow through that. In those moments of, say, parenting, when you're engaged with your child, it's really a co-regulating process. So I don't know whether you what it's resilience resilience in that vein to me kind of feels too independent because children cannot when a child exceeds their window of tolerance and they're dysregulated because they've exceeded their window of tolerance. They're stressed out because they've went outside of their window of tolerance. Your ability to maintain regulation is what supports them in the return of their own regulatory state. And so I wouldn't even say it's being resilient. It's a co-regulation process. And I'd love to talk about it more because I think it's a great question. It's a great thought.
I think about it in really small parenting situations. Like we're waiting in the doctor's office. My daughter wants to watch a show on my phone. I know that if I give that to her, she's going to be more calm and relaxed. but also we're about to go in there, and I know if she gets on her phone, sometimes she gets locked in because she's in the flow and she loves, and so then the transition might be harder. So it's like in that moment, I sometimes am thinking, do I do the thing that's easier that will, like, I can see her starting to get worked up about wanting something to entertain her, or do I, just stay calm and say no and look at this as a way to build some resilience, so to speak, of like, no, when we're in the doctor's office, we just wait. We're not going to be entertained by a phone or by, whatever it might be that you're wanting to just excite you and to stimulate you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And I think that the beautiful thing about parenting is that there's really no right or wrong. It's just what we do. And I think that you can, because I also hear limits, setting limits in that you can say to your child, and I think this is important. It is okay for parents to say no. And that is very healthy. It's very necessary. But here's where we get caught up. We say no, and then we feel guilty and ashamed because our children have an emotional reaction to it. So the no and the limit is separate from the emotional reaction. Now, what we don't do is we don't say, honey, we're not gonna watch the game right now, or we're not gonna get on the phone right now because we're gonna about to be going back to see the doctor, and I don't want us to get distracted. But why don't you go grab a book, or why don't we get up and let's walk outside and get some fresh air right quick, or why don't you come get on my lap and let me tickle you? We don't explain and then give a supportive experience. We set the limit and then we're like, deal with it. Well, sitting in a doctor's office is pretty freaking boring, even for adults. And so we're not always cognizant of the ramifications of kind of our adult world when you're a child. And I think that that's just something for us to really just to be aware of.
I think that these moments are challenging enough when it's individual, right? When it's just me and my daughter. But, I know you've got a big family. We're a family of five. So often I'm dealing with not one nervous system or one fear-based, human reacting. I've got multiple reacting against each other.
Yeah.
How do you begin to prioritize these moments with multiple fear responses?
I love the question, Nolan. These are all super good. Um, so the I just had another podcast this morning I was on, and I've been saying this a long time. In the '90s, we used to say, "Don't be a tool." Right? Don't be a tool, man.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't be a tool. It was so it has a
Totally.
negative connotation, right?
Right.
I believe we are the tool. You are a tool. You are the tool. This is your tool. How you show up, the frequency, the vibration you show up with is the tool. So when you say prioritize, the prioritization is not with on the children, it's on yourself. So you're showing up when you're present. And when you're present, you can be attuned. You can be dialed in. You can be connected. Yes, you've got things that have got to be done, and everyone has got to be attended to. And I like to tell parents, slowing down does not mean getting less done. It means that you're breathing, you're calming, you're thinking, you're staying present, you're focused, you're alert, you're connected. And when you're prioritizing your own regulation, you can create more regulation for the environment. And then when one of your children or two of your children or three of your children or whoever starts to dysregulate because you're attuned, you can listen. You're driving. I'm imagining you're driving in your minivan or your suburban. If it was Texas, it'd be a suburban. So
Right.
you're driving. You take your rearview mirror and you turn it so you can see that child, and you say, "Hey, bub," and you get their eye contact, and you wink at them, and you say, "We're good. We're okay." Right. So just that moment of connection from attunement, and you're just breathing, right? And you're driving, and they're all loud. I used to do this with adolescent boys. I had 6 adolescent boys in a group home. I put them in a suburban, and we go driving wherever, and they're excited, having a good time, and all teetering on complete dysregulation all the time. Anyway, 90% of the time, I would not say a word. I would drive. I might say, what do you guys want to listen to? Might put on some music. I would not say a thing except just focused on being present because I am creating the safety in the space. When I'm creating the safety in the space, I have all kinds of mechanisms within my control. And you said something a moment ago. You said we want to equip our children for to deal with the world, to be in the world. And this is where we have been led astray. We've been led to believe that controlling, suppressing, changing your children's behaviors is what's helping them learn how to deal with the world. You don't let a child have a big tantrum because that's not teaching them. That's letting them get away with things. Well, those are all external things. We want to create internal locus of control, not external. So being reactive and being controlling and having to shut down and suppress and dominate, that's all external. You're not teaching your children internal regulation. And in order to teach your child internal regulation, there's a couple of things. Number one, the definition of discipline is to teach, not to punish. To teach. If you and Joseph Ledoux says in times of stress, our thinking becomes confused and distorted, and our short-term memory is suppressed. If you want to teach your child, the optimized state for learning is clear thinking and available short-term memory. You can't teach your child by stressing them out even more. So you're driving the prioritization is with yourself. It's calming yourself down. If things get really hectic, pull the car over. Turn the music off. Wait a moment. There is so much power in just presence. And we get so hijacked internally by needing to create presence. But needing to create presence is needing to control. And needing to control comes from stress and fear and anxiety. When you're walking on eggshells, you are stressed. You're not calmly walking on eggshells. You are stressed. So you've got to calm yourself down. And then you can, when you're clear thinking and available short-term memory, then you can prioritize. Then you can say, this is something my parents never did for us. As children, my parents never took the time to realize that time and time and time again, driving in the car as kids was almost traumatizing. It was traumatizing. I tell the story. My dad, telling us to sit back because we'd be up on the back seat. And my dad, he didn't invent 1, 2, 3 magic. He'd never heard of it. My dad was like 1, 2, bam. So I could learn because I wasn't as stressed as my sister, who had a different kind of early history than I did. She was always stressed, and her short-term memory was always turned off. So she could not remember in the moment when my dad said, sit back. He meant, if you don't sit back, I'm going to create pain for you. And so over and over and over again, she would get back by my dad. And my dad was a big guy. He did, boom, bam, get knocked into the back seat. So often I have cousins that will still laugh and tell the story about when Uncle Bill would smack Christy and backhand Christy in the back seat. That's how often it happened. My parents never calmed themselves down enough to realize that what you're doing is not working. Maybe Brian needs to sit in the front seat. Maybe mom needs to sit in the back seat between the two kids and play with us and talk to dad. Maybe mom needs to drive and dad needs, there's all kinds of opportunities when we'll calm ourselves down.
Yeah. I don't think most of us don't realize how normalized we are to the stress that we live in on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis.
Yeah.
And so we're just reacting to things, like you say, constantly. So we don't even realize like what is at the base level of what we're reacting
Yeah.
from.
No.
And it's one of your like core concepts that I read in your book. I just want to read this. You said, it is your own fear that will cause the most problems with your own adoptive child. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on that dynamic of fear versus love as we bring our time to a close.
Well, fear causes us to react from the past. Fear causes us to believe someone's going to die. Fear causes us, fear disallows clear thinking. Fear disallows the availability of the short-term memory. Fear disempowers. Fear prevents you from remembering that you are an adult who have made it this far in life. You have come through so much. You are smart. You are capable. You are kind. You are a parent. You are a superstar. You are a superhero. But fear turns it all off and holds you hostage to all the negative things that you've ever experienced. And then when fear does that, not only does it overwhelm the moment with your child, completely overwhelms the moment, but two, it arrests you from creating the relationship and the environment for your child to be able to work through their own pain, their own trauma, and their own fear. Because we all require that. We all require loving, supportive, present relationships for the healing of our own trauma. So when we are arrested in fear and disempowered, then we forget that we have the power to create the space in the relationship for our children to create healing within themselves and to grow them up being more self-aware, being more understanding, and having greater capacity to create healing for themselves. That's why it's so important for us to calm our own fears. So important. It's
Oh,
imperative.
I love that. I love that. Bryan, thanks for the time today. Where's the best place for people to follow your work?
Either bryanpost.com, that's a great doorway. You can get access to a lot there. Um, Also, feartolove.com is another place with resources. But also, I'm on Instagram, Bryan Post Official, Bryan with a Y. We post 10 videos a day. I have a YouTube, Bryan Post on YouTube, free content. It's available. People can learn it. They can train themselves on it. And I actually started a app for parents, a support app for parents in that moment, and it's called Bondify.ai, and it is an AI powered Bryan Post. So parents can ask it questions. In fact, just this morning, I had a parent from the UK said, My Bryan Post AI isn't working and I'm so frustrated. Can you help? She said it's so good. And so we got tech support on it to help her. But I'm about to open that up, Nolan. I started that for the adoption community, for adoptive parents, because I really do believe if I can get adoptive parents in the moment of crisis or problem behavior to just stop and just connect with me on the phone, it's just like texting me, that I believe that I can reroute most significant outcomes. I started just for adoptive parents, but I'm about to open it up to all parents. But I'm also about to open it up for free. And so, even right now, you can still do 14 days. You can get 14 days free, test it out. And then it's only been like $16 a month. But I'm about to open it up completely for free. And so, parents could use it at any time, ask me questions. Any question, ask me any question. You're going to get a response sometimes better than what you'd get from me personally. And that's Bondify.ai, Bondify.
I love that. And I'm so glad to hear that you're opening it up to everyone.
Yes,
Obviously, you have an expertise and an experience in the adoptive world that I appreciate and that I saw. But like I said at the beginning, like these concepts that you're bringing are so universal.
yes,
And I mean, I think constantly, right? I tell friends and people all the time that like my kids are my greatest teachers. Like this has been my greatest psychological, emotional, spiritual practice is being a parent if you let it be, you know? So having someone like you sharing your experience and the tools and your perspective is amazing for an adoptive parent, for any parent, for just an individual that wants to know themselves better and feel more at ease and heal and be more grounded. So
yeah,
I'm really happy to hear that you're doing that.
awesome. Thank you,
Yeah, well,
Nolan.
thank you so much for the time today, Bryan. Yeah, I'm a huge
But
fan. I'm going to keep following you and yeah, soaking in all the goodness that you provide for everyone. So
thank
thank
you,
you.
brother.